Hey guys, so today we are looking at percentage of an amount, part 2, and you're tuning to Paul's Maths Labs. Thank you very much for tuning in with your favorite teacher, Paul. Okay, without further ado, let's get on. Okay, so percentage of an amount. So before we looked at some of the easier to find percentages, which was 25%, 50%, 10%, 1%. Okay, so now we basically have the same thing again, but now the percentages that we need to find aren't too nice. So we've got 1%, 3%, 19%, and 37%. Now I'm going to show you the way how I do this. Now some teachers may do it in different ways, but I'll show you for me what the easiest way for me is to basically find these types of percentages. Okay, and the key thing that I always do is I'm just going to write down a statement here. If you can find 1% of a value, you can find any percent. Now I'm going to show you how that is. Okay, so here again we need to calculate 1%, 3%, 19%, and 37% again. So 1%, 3%, 19%. Now you will need a calculator for this. Well, you don't have to. You may be very, very good at arithmetically, but sometimes if you're going to be trying to find some very, very hard percentages, you most probably will be allowed to use a calculator. Okay, but anyway, I'm going to show it to you how I do it this way. So let's find, first off, we're going to find 1% of 360 pound. So again, to find 1% of anything, you divide it by 100. Okay, so we got 360 divided by 100, and that's going to give us 3.6. Okay, or 3.6 pounds. Okay, now to find 3%, think of it. So you've got 1% now. You've got 1% is £3.60. So 3% would be triple that. Okay, so 3% would basically be 3 times 1%. Yeah, do you get what I'm saying? So 3 times 1%, and we know 1% was £3.60. So that is basically equal to 3 times 3.6. And this is where sometimes you may have to use a calculator. Not that I might as well use a calculator as well. So that is going to give us £10.80. Okay. Okay. Now, if you want to find 19%, what you need to do, you just basically need to times the 1% by 19. So 19 times 1%, which is same as 19 times 3.6, which is going to give us 68.4. So £68.40. Okay, and 37%, again, you can do it by finding 37 times 1%, which equals to 37 times 3.6, and that is going to give us £133.20. £133.20. Okay, so can you guys see what I'm doing at the moment? So in order for me to find all these 3%, 19%, 37%, these horrible percentages, I've basically just used my 1%, and I've times my 1% by whatever I need to find. So if I need to find 3%, I'll times 3 times by my 1%, or if I need to find 19%, I'll do 19 times my 1%, or if I want to find 37%, I'll do 37 times my 1%. Okay, so it's very, very simple, very, very easy like that if you can find 1%. And that's why I said that at the beginning, that if you can find 1% of anything, then you can find any percent of anything, basically. Okay, so let's go down to this one here. Again, practice makes perfect. So we need to find 1% again, 3% again, 19%, then 37%. Okay, so 1% of 120 would be 120 divided by 100. That's how to find 1% of anything, and that's going to give us 1.2 kg. Okay, now 3% would be 3 times 1%, which equals 3 times 1.2, and that is going to give us, guys, 3.6 kg. Okay, next one, 19%. So we're going to do 19 times our 1%, same as 19 times 1.2, and that, my friends, is going to give us 22.8. Next one, we've got 37%. So we're going to do 37 times 1%. Also same as 37 times 1.2, because that's what 1% is. So we have 37 times 1.2, and that's going to give us 44.4 kg. 44.4 kg. Okay. So guys, that is basically, if you want to find a percentage of any value and it's quite a horrible percentage, like maybe something like 17%, 19%, those sorts, as I was saying before, the best thing to do is always to be able to find 1%. And if you can find 1%, then you can find any percentage of any amount. Okay, because if you find 1%, you can times that by whatever percentage you need. So if you need to find 23%, you find your 1% first, then times that by 23, and that will give you 23% of the value. Okay, so guys, that is again percentage of an amount, and I will probably do another video to this one, showing you other ways in how you can find percentages of amounts when you don't necessarily use just 1%, where you may have to use knowledge of your 10%, which can help you to find your 5%, and if you can find your 25%, that can help you to find your 75%. Okay, so that's going to be the next thing that we're most probably going to be looking at when it comes to percentage of amounts. Thank you guys for tuning in to Paul's Maths Lab. If you have any comments or if you want to say anything, just leave a comment below, and hopefully I'll get back to you ASAP. Thank you guys very much, and I'll see you guys later.